The cabin lights of Delta Flight 1472 had already dimmed to that bruised purple glow that tells you the red eye is almost over. Seatbelt signs off, overhead bins creaking open, the metallic shuffle of 200 people reaching for coats and kids. Atlanta to National, wheels down scheduled for 11:47 p.m. on May 19, 2023. Most passengers were half asleep, mouths open, necks bent at painful angles. In 3A, Marcus Ellison was wide awake. He'd spent the last 4 hours reviewing incident reports on his tablet, runway incursions in Charlotte, a near miss over Memphis, the kind of paperwork that keeps the sky safe but steals every minute of a father's life. His daughter, Amaya, graduated Howard the next morning. He'd promised her he'd be in the third row, left side, holding the sign that read, Dr. Ellison, Ph.D. in astrophysics, but still calls her daddy. He was cutting it close, but he was going to make it. Then the intercom clicked. A short, sharp inhale, the way pilots breathe when they think no one's really listening. Ladies and gentlemen, this is your captain. We're going to have a slight delay at the gate. There's an individual in first class who, doesn't appear to belong in this cabin. For everyone's comfort and security, airport law enforcement will be meeting the aircraft to resolve the situation. Silence rippled outward like a dropped stone in still water. Phones came up. Necks craned. In the blue-gray half-light, every head turned toward row 3. Marcus felt it before he saw it, the weight of 200 assumptions settling on his shoulders. Navy suit, pressed that morning in an Atlanta hotel. Gold cufflinks his wife had given him the day he was confirmed as FAA Regional Director for the Southern Region. Wedding ring glinting under the reading light. None of it mattered. The only thing the cabin saw was brown skin in a seat that cost $3,000. A flight attendant, blonde ponytail, name tag, Kelsey, hovered in the aisle, smile frozen in customer service rictus. Sir, can I see your boarding pass again? Her voice shook just enough to carry. Marcus handed it over without a word. Kelsey's eyes flicked from the seat number to his face and back again, as if the paper might change if she stared hard enough. Behind her, the cockpit door cracked open. Captain Daniel Whitlock stepped out, still in his 4 stripes, still wearing the mirrored sunglasses some pilots refuse to remove even at midnight. He didn't look at Marcus. He looked past him, scanning the cabin like a man confirming his own verdict. Officers are already on the jet bridge, Whitlock announced, loud enough for the first 10 rows. We'll have this handled quickly. The plane hadn't even reached the gate yet. The seatbelt sign blinked back on with a ding that sounded, to Marcus, like a starting gun. The jet bridge clanged against the fuselage with a hollow boom, the sound of a cage snapping shut. 2 uniformed officers from the Metropolitan Washington Airport's authority stepped aboard before the door was even fully open. Radios crackled. One had his hand resting on his holster like it was the most natural thing in the world. The taller one, nameplate reading Ramirez, locked eyes with Captain Whitlock. A single nod passed between them, wordless, practiced. The kind of nod that says we've done this before. Marcus rose slowly, hands visible, palms open. There's been a misunderstanding, he said, voice low, steady, the same tone he used when addressing congressional subcommittees. My boarding pass is right there. I'm on my way to my daughter's graduation. Ramirez didn't answer. His partner, Officer Crawford, already had the cuffs out, steel glinting under the cabin LEDs. The first cuff closed around Marcus's left wrist with a ratchet click that cut through every conversation on the plane. Passengers who had been pretending to look at their phones now filmed openly. A woman in 5C whispered, loud enough for 3 rows, "He must have done something." Marcus turned slightly, trying to face the officers. "My ID is in my inside pocket. Federal credentials. I'm happy to show you." Crawford twisted Marcus's arm behind his back and snapped the second cuff on harder than physics required. The metal bit. A bright sting of pain shot up to his shoulder, familiar in the worst way. He'd been cuffed once before, 28 years ago, age 19, for walking while black in the wrong suburb. Some lessons the body never forgets. Captain Whitlock finally met Marcus's eyes. For half a second the mirrored lenses slipped down the bridge of his nose, revealing pale blue irises filled with something between triumph and fear. Then the sunglasses went back up, and Whitlock stepped aside like a bouncer proud of the trash he'd just taken out. They walked him down the aisle backwards so the cuffs wouldn't show on too many cameras. Every step scraped expensive loafers across the carpeted floor. A little boy in 8F stood on his seat and asked his mother, "Why are they arresting the nice man who gave me pretzels?" The mother shushed him so fast her hand left a red mark on his cheek. At the front galley, Kelsey the flight attendant wouldn't look up. Her hands trembled as she gripped the counter. The smell of burnt coffee and fear sweat hung thick in the air. Marcus caught the reflection of himself in the polished steel of the jump seat. Tall, dignified, wrists bound, being marched off a plane he literally regulated. The jet bridge itself was a tunnel of fluorescent humiliation. Cold air, rubber smell, the distant whine of ground equipment. Ramirez pushed him along faster than necessary. Marcus's shoulder clipped the wall and sent a fresh jolt through the cuffs. Halfway down, Crawford muttered into his radio, "One in custody, possible 10 to 15, refusing to comply with crew instructions." The lie landed like a slap. They emerged into Terminal B, Gate 22, just after midnight on May 20, 2023. Travelers waiting for the inbound flight froze mid-step. Phones rose in a ripple. Somewhere a teenage girl gasped, "They're arresting someone in a suit." Marcus kept his chin high, eyes forward, because he knew in his bones, that every camera pointed at him right now was the only defense he had left. They didn't take him to airport police offices. They took him straight past the checkpoints, past the TSA podiums still littered with Memorial Day bins, down a service corridor marked employees only, and into a holding room that smelled of bleach and old vomit. The door closed with a hydraulic sigh. The cuffs finally came off, but only so they could be replaced with heavier ones chained to a bench bolted to the floor. Marcus sat alone under a buzzing light, wrists raw, graduation program still folded in his breast pocket, and listened to the muffled sounds of his plane being pushed back from the gate without him. The holding room was a concrete box painted the color of nicotine. One steel bench, one flickering tube light, one camera in the corner with a red diode that blinked like it was mocking him. The cuffs chaining Marcus to the bench were airport issue, heavier, colder, designed for people who might actually try to run. His arms were wrenched forward at an angle that made his shoulders burn within minutes. Every time he shifted, the chain rattled loud enough to echo. Time dilated the way it only does when you're powerless. 10 minutes felt like an hour. The graduation program in his pocket had started to crease against his chest every time he breathed. He could still smell the cabin on his clothes, recycled air, someone's vanilla perfume, the copper tang of his own adrenaline. At 12:47 a.m., the door finally opened. Sergeant Ramirez returned with a clipboard and a look that said paperwork was the only god he worshipped tonight. Behind him, Officer Crawford carried a plastic property bag already labeled Ellison. Marcus, refused TOD plane. The lie was now official. Ramirez unhooked the bench chain but left the cuffs on. "Stand up." "Inventory." Marcus rose slowly. The room tilted. The red eye and the cuffs had stolen circulation from his hands. They turned his pockets inside out like he was carrying contraband instead of breath mints and a government BlackBerry. His wedding ring clinked into the bag. His FAA credentials, the ones that could have ended this entire circus in 30 seconds, were slid out of the leather wallet and held up to the light like they were checking a fake ID at a bar. Ramirez squinted. Federal Aviation Administration. Regional Director? He read the title slowly, tasting each syllable like it might be poisoned. Crawford leaned in, suddenly unsure. Marcus spoke for the first time in almost an hour. "That's correct. I'd like to make my phone call now." Ramirez's jaw worked side to side. He wasn't paid enough for this level of complication. He dropped the credentials back into the bag, sealed it, and scribbled something on the form. "You'll get your call at Central Booking." They marched him out a different door, down a service hallway that smelled of jet fuel and fryer grease, into the back of an unmarked airport police SUV. No seatbelt. The partition between front and back was scratched with names and dates and one fresh carving that read FUCK 12. The ride to the airport precinct took 4 minutes but felt ceremonial, like a funeral procession for a man still breathing. At the precinct sally port, The air was thick with disinfectant and despair. Fluorescent lights turned everyone's skin the color of old cheese. A female sergeant with a braid tight enough to deflect bullets took one look at Marcus in his suit and cuffs and muttered, "Captain's gonna love this one." They sat him on another bench, this one sticky. A drunk man 2 seats down vomited quietly into a trash can. Somewhere a woman was screaming about her baby. Marcus closed his eyes and tried to picture Amaya walking across the stage in her cap and gown, tried to hold onto the image before the night erased it completely. By 2:13 a.m. the decision had been made somewhere above Sergeant Ramirez's pay grade. Marcus Ellison was no longer an airport problem. He was now a DeKalb County problem. The airport's authority washed its hands with the speed of a corporation that had already lawyered up. A county transport van, white with green stripes, cage in the back, rolled into the Sally Port like a hearse arriving on schedule. 2 new deputies, both younger than Marcus's youngest inspector, yanked him up by the elbows and transferred the cuffs from front to back without ever asking his name. The ride south on 85 was 43 minutes of silence broken only by the dispatcher's voice calling out domestic disputes and DUIs. Marcus stared through the mesh at the city lights sliding past, downtown's glow, the gold dome of the Capitol, the endless river of red taillights, and felt the graduation slipping further out of reach with every mile. The deputies never turned around. To them he was just cargo in a wrinkled suit. DeKalb County Jail rose out of the dark like a concrete cathedral no one ever prayed in. Floodlights bleached everything bone white. The van backed into the garage and the doors rolled up with a metallic shriek. Cold hit him first, then the smell. Industrial cleaner fighting a losing battle against decades of urine and fear. Intake was a production line of humiliation. Belt off. Shoes off. Watch off. They made him bend and spread while a deputy with latex gloves narrated the process like he was reading from a script he hated. The orange jumpsuit they handed him was stiff with starch and 2 sizes too small. The crotch stopped halfway down his thighs, the sleeves ended above his wrists. He looked ridiculous and they knew it. Someone laughed. Fingerprints. The camera flash left purple ghosts in his vision. When the booking officer asked for occupation, Marcus answered clearly, Regional Director, Federal Aviation Administration. The officer typed it in without looking up, the way you type unemployed or construction worker. The computer didn't care. They put him in a holding pen with 20 other men who had also lost the night. Concrete bench, stainless toilet in the corner, the floor sticky with something you didn't want to identify. The jumpsuit itched. His wrists still carried the red rings from the cuffs. Every so often a trustee slid a tray through the slot. 2 slices of white bread, 1 slice of something that might once have been bologna, a carton of milk that smelled like plastic. At 4:28 a.m. the lights snapped on full. A deputy banged the bars. Ellison. Roll it up. Marcus stood, thinking finally, lawyer, phone call, explanation. Instead they walked him to an isolation cell the size of a walk-in closet. Door slammed. Lights out except for a thin blade of fluorescence under the door. He sat on the bare mattress and felt the first real crack in the armor he'd worn for decades. The graduation was in 7 hours. Amaya would look for him in the audience and he wouldn't be there. He pressed the heels of his hands against his eyes until he saw sparks. Somewhere in the distance a man screamed until his voice gave out. The concrete drank the sound and gave nothing back. Marcus Ellison, the man whose signature could ground an entire airline, curled on his side in an orange jumpsuit that didn't fit, and listened to the jail settle into the long, indifferent hours before dawn. Saturday, May 20th, 2023, 6:12 a.m. The first meal tray slid under the door like an insult. Powdered eggs the color of wet cement, 1 strip of turkey bacon that snapped like plastic, and a bruised apple that rolled to a stop against Marcus's bare foot. He hadn't slept. The mattress was a thin blue pad over steel. Every time he drifted off, the lights snapped on 4 count, and a deputy's flashlight swept across his face like a searchlight looking for guilt. By the 3rd count he stopped trying to sleep. At 9:45 a.m. they moved him to general population, Pod 4B, 2nd tier. The door rolled open with a hydraulic scream and 40 pairs of eyes turned toward the new fish in the too small jumpsuit. Marcus stepped onto the tier carrying a rolled mat, a square of state soap that smelled like gasoline, and the last scraps of a dignity no one here was interested in buying. The stairs clanged under his county-issued slides. Someone whistled low. Someone else muttered, 5-0 in a suit, like it was a joke they'd all heard before. His assigned bunk was bottom, 4B18, right under a television bolted high on the wall blasting a morning talk show laugh track. The man above him, tall, prison pale, neck tattoos that looked like spilled ink, leaned over the edge. You steal somebody's frequent flyer miles, bruh? Laughter rippled down the tier. Marcus didn't answer. He sat on the edge of the bunk, elbows on knees, and stared at the floor until the laughter died of boredom. The day stretched like taffy. Rec Yard was 20 minutes in a concrete pen under a sky the color of a dirty nickel. The air smelled of diesel from the nearby interstate. Men walked the fence line in slow circles, trading whispers about appeals and commissary and who was getting out next week. Marcus stayed against the wall, arms folded, feeling the sun burn through the orange fabric until his shoulders blistered. Every so often someone recognized him from the viral video that was already everywhere. Someone's cousin had sent it to someone's baby mama, and now half the pod knew the plain dude was locked up with them. They looked at him differently after that, wary, like he might secretly be famous enough to bring cameras and consequences. Back inside, the phones were a war zone. 20 men, one phone, and a line that never moved. Marcus waited 4 hours, standing against the wall while a man argued with his girlfriend about why he couldn't bond out before Mother's Day. When his turn finally came, the collect call to his wife's cell rang once and went to voicemail, airplane mode, because she was already at Howard setting up for graduation photos. He left no message. The automated voice told him he had used his one allotted call for the day. By lights out he had spoken exactly 7 words to another human being, bottom bunk, thank you, to the CO who pointed. The second night was worse. The air conditioning had died sometime around 3 a.m. and the pod turned into a sweatbox. The concrete radiated heat like a griddle. Men stripped to boxers and lay on the floor because the bunks were too hot to touch. Someone on the top tier started screaming about demons. No one told him to shut up because half of them saw the same shadows. Marcus sat on the edge of his bunk with his forehead against the cool metal rail, counting heartbeats. The graduation had started 4 hours ago. He pictured the processional anyway, the brass quintet playing Pomp and Circumstance, Amaya's braids swinging under the crimson tassel, the moment she would scan the audience and realize the third row, left side, was empty. He pictured his wife Keisha standing up anyway, holding the sign alone, forcing the smile that cost her everything. At 10:17 a.m. Sunday, a deputy appeared at the door with a clipboard. Ellison Marcus. Roll it up. You made bond. Marcus didn't move. Bond meant someone on the outside had finally been reached. It also meant walking out in the same wrinkled jumpsuit because his suit was now evidence. He rolled the mat, handed back the soap he never used, and followed the deputy down the tier. A few men clapped slowly, jail applause, half respect, half jealousy. The tattooed guy from the top bunk called out, "Tell them we still flyin' dirty up in here, bruh." Marcus lifted 2 fingers in acknowledgement, the closest thing to a wave he could manage. Booking reversed itself in slow motion. They handed him the plastic bag with his clothes folded exactly as they'd been taken, shoes on top like nothing had happened. The property clerk slid the sealed evidence bag across the counter and made him sign for his own life. When he opened it, the FAA credentials were still there, but the gold eagle on the cover was scratched deep, as if someone had tested it with a key to see if it was real. Keisha was waiting in the lobby in the same navy dress she'd worn to the graduation. Her eyes were red, but her back was straight. The moment the door buzzed open, she crossed the tile in 4 strides and pressed her face into his neck without a word. She smelled like cocoa butter and the hotel shampoo and every apology she couldn't speak yet. Marcus held her so tightly the jumpsuit seams creaked. Outside, the Georgia sun hit him like a verdict. May heat shimmered off the parking lot asphalt. News vans were already lined up along the fence line, cameras rising like periscopes the second he appeared. Someone shouted, "Director Ellison. Did the pilot know who you were?" Another voice, closer, younger, "Sir, how does it feel to spend 2 nights in jail for sitting in a seat you paid for?" Keisha opened the passenger door of their SUV and guided him in like he was made of glass. The air conditioning blasted cold against his sunburned neck. Only when the doors locked and the windows went up did she let herself cry, ugly, angry sobs that shook the steering wheel. Marcus stared at the jail shrinking in the side mirror. 48 hours. No charges filed. No apology issued. Just a man in an orange jumpsuit that still smelled like bleach and someone else's despair. He reached into his pocket and pulled out the crumpled graduation program he'd somehow kept through every search. The cover read Howard University, Class of 2023. Inside, Amaya had written in purple ink, "For Daddy, who taught me the sky isn't the limit, it's just the view." He pressed the paper to his forehead and closed his eyes. Somewhere above them, planes were still taking off and landing, pilots still announcing slight delays, passengers still boarding with the quiet trust that someone, somewhere, was making sure they were safe. Marcus Ellison knew better now. Monday, May 22, 2023, 7:03 a.m. The FAA Southern Regional Office sits in a low brick building off Camp Creek Parkway, windows tinted the color of authority. Inside, the 6th-floor conference room still smelled like burnt coffee and panic. Marcus had showered 3 times since Keisha brought him home, but the jail clung to him anyway, under his fingernails, behind his ears, in the dreams that snapped him awake gasping. He wore a fresh suit today, charcoal gray, and the gold cufflinks his wife had laid out without being asked. His deputy regional director, Carlin Gwynn, had already pushed every non-essential meeting for the week. The rest of the staff pretended to work while watching his office door like it might explode. At 7:11 a.m. the secure phone on his desk rang with a 202 area code. Marcus stared at it for 2 rings, then picked up. "Director Ellison, this is Deputy Administrator Bradley from headquarters. The administrator wants you on the next available flight to D.C. We're convening an emergency session of the Accountability Board. Today." Marcus's voice came out flat, scraped raw. "With respect, sir, I just spent 48 hours in DeKalb County, Orange because a Delta captain decided I looked suspicious. I'm not flying anywhere until someone explains why I'm not the one convening that board." Silence stretched across the fiber optic line like a held breath. Then, "Understood. Stand by for a Teams link. 10 minutes. By 7:30 the screen in the conference room glowed with the seal of the Department of Transportation. 23 boxes populated one by one, the Secretary's Chief of Staff, the FAA Administrator herself, General Counsel, the head of the Office of Civil Rights, 2 deputy administrators, and in the bottom right corner, a box labeled Captain Daniel P. Whitlock, DL 1472 May 19, 23. Whitlock's camera was off. His nameplate pulsed red, audio muted. The administrator, a woman whose reputation was built on never blinking first, spoke first. "Marcus, we've reviewed the body cam, the cockpit voice recorder, and the passenger statements. What happened to you was unacceptable. Full stop. We are opening a 215 investigation into Delta's safety culture and a separate Title VI probe. The pilot has been removed from duty effective immediately." Marcus leaned forward until his face filled his square. Removed from duty isn't enough. He fabricated a security threat based on the color of my skin and used the intercom as a public flogging post. My daughter graduated without me while I sat in a cell with no charges. I want his certificate in front of the Emergency Revocation Board by close of business tomorrow. Whitlock's camera flicked on. The man looked like he hadn't slept either, eyes bloodshot, uniform shirt unbuttoned at the collar. He opened his mouth, closed it, opened it again. "Sir, there was a passenger complaint from first class. Multiple passengers felt uncomfortable. I followed protocol." Marcus's laugh was soft and lethal. Protocol doesn't include announcing over the PA that a black man doesn't belong in a seat he paid for. Protocol doesn't include calling for armed officers while we're still on the taxiway. You saw a black man in a suit and decided he must have sneaked past the velvet rope. You never even asked my name. The administrator's box enlarged. "Captain Whitlock, you are now on administrative leave without pay. You will surrender your certificates to the nearest FSDO by 1700 today. Director Allison, anything short of full revocation you would consider insufficient. Marcus didn't hesitate. Correct. The screen went black on Whitlock's end first. Tuesday, May 23, 2023, 9:42 a.m. The emergency revocation order hit the FAA's public docket at exactly 9:42 a.m. Captain Daniel P. Whitlock, ATP certificate number 2746193, revoked for life. No appeal window. No second chance. The language was surgical. Intentional falsification of a security threat report, abuse of cockpit authority, and conduct prejudicial to aviation safety. The order was signed by Marcus Ellison himself, the same man Whitlock had ordered dragged off the plane 4 nights earlier. By 10:05 the story detonated. CNN cut into regular programming with a churn that read FAA Director cuffed on flight, now grounds the pilot who did it. Twitter, still Twitter then, folded in on itself. #FlyingWhileBlack trended worldwide within 20 minutes. Someone stitched the body cam audio with the cockpit voice recorder and set it to minor key piano. The clip hit 30 million views before lunch. Delta's stock opened down 8% and kept falling. Their crisis PR team issued a statement so carefully lawyered it said nothing at all, then a second one that promised full cooperation and cultural sensitivity retraining. By noon the CO was on the tarmac at Hartsfield in shirt sleeves, reading a third apology off his phone while cameras flashed like artillery. Inside Marcus's office the secure phone rang again. This time it was the White House domestic policy advisor asking, quietly, if he'd accept a call from the president. Marcus let it ring 4 times, then pressed decline. Some conversations could wait until he was ready to have them on his terms. Instead he walked downstairs to the lobby where Keisha and Amaya were waiting with a cardboard sign that now read, in fresh purple marker, "Daddy grounded the right plane." Amaya had flown in that morning on a ticket Marcus refused to let Delta comp. She hugged him so hard the sign bent between them. Outside, the Georgia sun was merciless, but the 3 of them stood in it anyway, cameras popping from across the street, strangers clapping from passing cars. Marcus looked up at the sky, clear, high, full of contrails, and felt something settle in his chest that wasn't quite peace, but wasn't rage anymore either. He had spent 48 hours in Orange because one man decided a black man couldn't possibly belong. Now that man would never sit in a cockpit again. And every pilot, every gate agent, every passenger who watched the video loop on mute in airport bars knew exactly whose signature had made it happen. The system hadn't fixed itself. Marcus Ellison had simply refused to let it keep breaking him.